morning, Coronation. I am excited to be here today with a special guest. My name is Kendra Cooke, and I'm the Senior Real Estate Coach here at the Core Training. And we are very fortunate today to have a guest. I'm going to read a quote out of his book, and then we're going to jump in. I'm going to tell you all about him, and he's going to share a lot about you as well. But one of the quotes that I pulled out of your book that I absolutely love, Winston Churchill quote says, "We make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give." And we at the Core speak so much on gifting and giving and being super generous and grateful for what we have, which resonated with me when I read your book. And so I'm grateful to introduce you guys to John Ruhlin today, who wrote Giftology. If you don't have this book, you must go buy this book. It will change the way you do business, and John's going to talk all about that today. But to get started, one of the coolest things I read in your book is I was a young entrepreneur as well in real estate. My son is 20, super hard worker. And one of the coolest things I read to get started, I want you to introduce how you got into Cutco knives. Top producer at 20 years old, John. I mean, really, like, a sales career that starts at 20 is pretty tough because most people are going to say, oh, you're too young, or you don't know how to sell, or I don't trust what you're selling if you're that young. So introduce us to that concept and get us started on how you started your sales career.
Well, it started like a lot of businesses and sales careers do. It started out of desperation and out of a need to make money. I grew up a farm boy. I'm not a salesperson at heart. People would be shocked to know I'm actually an introvert, even though we get paid 25 to 50 grand to go keynote. I actually was deathly afraid of public speaking for up until probably 5 years ago, because I grew up milking goats. I grew up hoeing, corn in the 1 acre garden. I grew up like Daniel Boone, like we heated our house with wood. And so I was going to go to med school because I hated blue collar work, and I got straight A's all through school. I was kind of an overachiever, and I started a side business and almost got killed climbing ladders working for Time Warner Cable. And so I found out a buddy of mine who was a seminary major and was the antithesis of a salesperson started selling these Cutco knives. And I'm like, Steve, you couldn't sell water to somebody in the middle of the desert. Like, are you serious? You're selling these knives? And then I found out how much they were. I'm like, a full set's like $5 grand. Like, as a college kid, that's like, might as well have said $5 million. So I committed to give it 6 weeks. And my mom, who owned Cutco for 40 years, was like, John, none of our friends can afford this. Like, you're going to starve. Like, you're never going to pay for med school. And I was like, Mom, thanks for the pep talk. Like, that's not exactly what I was looking for. But I ended up going in. I did 40 appointments in my first 10 days, and my life changed because of one mentor. And that mentor he was an attorney, and it was my girlfriend's dad. And so I got to spend a lot of time with him. And when you're poor, you notice when people are really generous. So I saw Paul, this attorney, and he was a rainmaker. But he was always giving things away. He'd find a deal on noodles. He'd buy a semi-load and give everybody at church the next Sunday, like 300 people, like 20 cases of noodles. I'm like, Paul, that was 30 grand. Like, are you insane? And he's like, I know, but did you see their smiles? And I'm like, even the most evil person on the planet would smile if they got a year's supply of noodles. So I pitched him the idea of giving away Cutco pocket knives. He was my 4th presentation. And I thought all his clients are CEOs of $1 million, $100 million companies like real estate, mortgage brokers, law firms, home builders, lumber yards, and they're all into the outdoors. And so I'm like, maybe Paul will have mercy on me and buy 100 of these Cutco pocket knives. They're not cheap. They're like 60, 70 bucks. And he changed my life forever. He's probably 60 at the time. It's before church. We're at the dinner table. It's like 9 a.m. And he'd already bought a set of Cutco knives for himself and his 3 unmarried daughters. That's the kind of guy that he was. And so he leans back in his chair. He's like, John, I don't want to buy pocket knives. Could I wear paring knives? I'm like, you want to give a bunch of grown men CEOs like $1 million and $1 billion companies like a kitchen tool? I'm like, Paul, I'm obviously desperate, but why? And he says, John, in 40 years in business, the reason I have more access, the reason I have more referrals than I can handle is I found out one simple truth. And that is that if you take care of the family in business, everything else seems to take care of itself. So for me, it was like this lightning bolt. I'm 20 years old and I start to mimic Paul. I'm like, I want his life when I'm 60. I want referrals without asking. I want to buy the real estate that becomes the Walmart, which is what he did. He owned banks and oil wells. He was the most chill person. He wasn't like a high stress person. He was like relaxed. And so I started to pitch, and I would find out, instead of buying beer, I was buying like $300 carving sets and sending them to CEOs of $200 million insurance companies. And I packaged it up in my dorm room, and I put a little handwritten handwritten note inside, because I saw Paul write handwritten notes every single day. And it said, carve out 5 minutes for me. I promise it'll be worth your time. And I send it off. 2 weeks later, assistant calls me back and says, Mr. Smith wants to meet with you. He's really impressed with the package. And I would go in there with the one suit I had a Mickey Mouse tie, and I wore my glasses to look smarter. None of this is made up. You can check with my friends from that time period. And I walk into the boardroom. In walks Mr. Smith. He's in his 60s. I walk in at 21. And he's like, are you the John Ruhlin that sent me the knives? I'm like, yes, sir. He's like, I thought you'd be like 55, like some seasoned sales executive. He's like, I'm confused. Are you here to sell me knives? And I nervously laughed. I'm like, no, I'm actually here to help you and your 1,000 sales reps to do exactly what I did to you, to your top 10,000 relationships, to drive 4 things: referrals without asking, engagement, access, and to help you build your business and get 100x return. And his jaw hits the ground. He's like, you're really good. And I ended up walking out of that meeting with a PO for 1,000 knife sets. Cutco thought that was fraud because they thought I was selling them on eBay. They'd never seen an order that big before. And so I started to mimic this, what we now call the Giftology system, of using gifting systematically, not trinkets, not putting your logo on it, not any of these things. We started to mimic these things. And by the time I was a senior in college, out of 1.5 million people Cutco's worked with over 7 years, we were their #1 distributor. Not because I'm the best salesperson, but I use gifting to get access. We started to land pro sports teams, and it wasn't about the knife, although to this day we still sell millions of dollars in knives. But it was about using gifting with a thoughtful purpose to drive ROI, not as a check the box once a year.
Right. And I want to expand on that a little bit, because we in the core, we talk a lot about gifting, and we the big clients that we chase, we call whales. So whether it's a lender in our program that we coach is chasing realtors who do hundreds of millions of dollars in real estate, or a realtor who is, chasing a builder or a financial planner that they can get return clients and referrals from. That's what we would call a whale. So that's exactly what you just laid out. You just figure out how to get in the door through the gifting, service the family. But I want to take that one step further, because in the book, one of the examples you gave that I love, I was flying home from Maryland reading it, and you talked about a CEO who was talking to his team about how, we want to give the Ritz experience. And everybody's like, we don't know what the Ritz experience is because we've never stayed in a Ritz. And so that CEO said, well, we got to fix that, because I know if I get you to experience it, that will trickle down to our clients, which will in return, give us a lot of referrals to grow the business. So touch on that a little bit. You touched on catering to the family, but you also have to cater with gifting through the clients and their employees and team members, right?
No question. I mean, our team, I can't expect them to get the Ritz-Carlton level experience. And so one of the things that we do for our employees, one, we take them to the Ritz. We gift them when they start with us. Most people give a gift when you're leaving the company or when you've been there for 10 years. I send my interns headphones like this. They're $300-400, and people are like, that's a waste of money. And I'm like, if you want to recruit somebody into your firm that's best in class, to spend $400 on an intern and say, hey, I wanted to give you something to block out the noise during finals, they've never been treated this way. Most people, after they've been at a company for 5 or 10 years, it's like the pen pencil set or the cheap watch for $25. It's like, oh, thank you so much for your 10,000 hours of blood, sweat, and tears away from your family. Here's a trinket. And so our belief is that you should celebrate somebody when they start. You should celebrate people not just once a year. And so we pay, one of the things we do for all of our employees, they all work remotely, and we pay to have their houses cleaned every other week, because they're all stay-at-home moms, they have kids, they're married, and it's something they would never do for themselves. If you gave them the option of the gift or cash, they would choose cash and then pay a bill or do something because they feel guilty. But it costs us $2,000 per employee per year. Wow. And people are like, how could you afford to do that? When I spoke at Google, they're like, oh my gosh, we could never afford that. And I'm like, you guys have slides in your lobby. Like, really, you can't afford $2,000? And it's really a matter of priority. Nobody brags that they got a 401k match, but they will brag to their friends and family that they get their house cleaned every other week, because it makes their life better and easier in the moment, and their quality of their relationship, their marriage. So $2,000 gives us like $50,000 in value. And I never have trouble recruiting people to my firm, because their friends, family, and everybody is like, is Giftology hiring anytime soon? Like when I spoke at Google, even they came up to me and says, Google doesn't pay to have our houses cleaned. Like, are you hiring part-time? And I laughed. I'm like, this is Google, like one of the top 100 best places to work. But when you put this into practice and treat other people with that radical generosity, when you go all in on people, it's amazing how relationships flourish. And most people, they hold back. They ask themselves, what's the least I can get away with? So when they're taking their employees, they're like, I don't want to do the Ritz. Why don't we just do a Holiday Inn? And they don't realize that they're shortchanging themselves by not making investments in people. That's why when people do gifting, they're like, what's the least I can get away with? I'll do a koozie or a cooler or whatever. And I'm like, you're taking care of people that if they become your whale client, they could send you millions of dollars over the next 20 years. And you're trying to save a nickel or a dime or a dollar. Like, you say you're best in class and world class and first class. Is what you say and what you do and spend your money on congruent? And most people, they're like, oh yeah, I'll send a jacket, and then put their logo on it. I'm like, do you really think that affluent realtor or financial advisor or CEO of a company wants some jacket, even if it's an Under Armour jacket or some fancy brand, with their logo on it? No. Everybody cares about themselves. And so at a core level, we're teaching people to completely flip what was marketing and branding. They don't realize they're actually damaging relationships by what they're sending, but nobody's rude enough to actually write them a handwritten note and say, I actually thought less of you in the relationship based upon what you sent me.
Well, and I think that brings up a good point. You also hit home in the book, and you kind of just hit on it here, but the gifting should be all about the recipient and not about us. And I think you're right. I think we have spent so many times or so many hours in classes or reading books about branding yourself. And so we get in that rat race of, everything has our logo on it, but where does that stuff really go? If you're at a golf tournament, you use the koozie, you use it that day, and then it goes in the trash or whatever. So I love the fact that you really hone in on the gifting is about the recipient. So will you expand on that a little bit? You talked about the headphones, but how do you gather that information? How do you know that that gift is specific to them? We in the core do what we call an all about you form. And so we gain a lot of information. What's your favorite team? What kind of books do you like to read? Where do you like to eat? And so we try to really tailor our gifting around them too, but it sounds like you take that one more level up. So can you explain that?
Yeah, so my budget, I started out $500 a month 20 years ago. Now we're up to, this past year, we did about 425 grand in gifts, me, just John Ruhlin. And 80% of that is targeted not at the executive, the decision maker, the people that you're trying to get, the CEO, the realtor, the whatever. Because guess what? They go to nice dinners all the time. They go to golf courses that they want to. They get bourbon and cigars and nice hotels and spa treatments. Guess who gets the worst out of being in business? Their spouse, who's never included in a lot of those things. Their assistant, who's treated like a gatekeeper and treated like a pawn. And so 80% of the gifting I do, people are like, why do you still do the stupid knives? I've done the knives before, it didn't work. And I'm like, did you find out what the spouse's name was and engrave her or his name on it? Did you put the family name? Did you put their date? Did you put a quote or something that tied in that family and made it an artifact to them? Most people, when they do gifts, even like Tiffany's or Bose or Rolex, like I've seen people give Rolexes, and I'm like, I love Rolex, it's great. But if like Domino's gave out Rolexes and put Domino's on the white face of the Air King, guess what happened? People traded it in because they didn't, even if you worked at Domino's, you didn't want a freaking Domino's logo on your Rolex. And so what we teach people is that if you get one detail wrong, and one detail could be you put the logo on it instead of the spouse's name and the family name and made it personal to them. That one thing will take a Cutco knife and make it a promo item and swag and trinkets that people feel embarrassed to use in front of others, or it was made just for them. So one detail, like personalizing it. So 80% of the gifting I do, I take care of the assistant, the spouse, the kids, and the pets, those 4 people. That's where I put 80% of my, because even if you know an executive is into bourbon, and so you're like, oh, I'm creative, I'm gonna send him a bottle of Buffalo Trace. Meanwhile, when he celebrates, he drinks Pappy for $3,000 a bottle, and you send him a $30 bottle. Nothing wrong with that. But when you try to personalize it to something that they're really into, like somebody that's into golf, I'm into golf. I have 5 pairs of golf shoes already. I've been to so many tournaments. I already have putters and I have more clubs than I could use ever. But if you take care of my wife and make me look like the hero to my wife or to my 3 daughters, or you take care of my 3 assistants, game over. Because guess what? They control my calendar. They control where we vacation. They control all of that. I get treated like royalty when I travel. I get to fly first class or private. I stay at the Ritz. But my wife, my assistant, my kids, my pets, you take care of those people with your gifting. So a lot of times people, we call it the inner circle. When I'm doing gifting, people are like, oh, that's stupid. I don't want to do something for the family. The guy likes cigars. And I'm like, are you going to fly him to Cuba and have this hand-rolled experience of like the cigars? Because otherwise, he gets cigars sent to him all the time. He may be thankful for the 5 minutes, But I win when I send something to somebody and they use it every single day for the next 15 years.
Oh, yeah.
Because my cost per impression goes way down. Most people are like, well, I sent a nice bottle of wine for $200. I'm like, well, that's great. They thought about you for 15 minutes. It's one of the reasons we don't do consumables and we don't do gifts that are just for the guy or the gal, the executive, because unless I can do something that's best in class that they don't already have, oftentimes it feels good to send it, but it's wasted money.
Yeah, and I will toot your horn for you just for a second, because when I called you out of the blue and said, hey, will you do this interview with me? You don't know me from Adam. 1 week to the day, I got a beautiful package from you with your book, the hardback book, Giftology, which is still in the book and in the box, and it's over here on my shelf. I'm like, don't touch it. In a beautiful bag, but more importantly, you sent me 3 Cutco knives, and it had my husband and my name on it. Well, guess who cooks in my house? My husband. And so this morning when I left, he was juicing, and he was using a Cutco knife, chopping up the vegetables to go in the juicer. So you were a big hit winner for that. So you are right. When you get to the spouse and the other person, and it can be a sharing experience for the family, it really hit home for him. So thank you for the knives publicly, and it was a great gift. So making it very personal. Next question I have for you is, you know, in the core, we talk all about the money. So we're about accountability, profitability, and I love that you kind of put a number on what you should reinvest into those relationships, because that's things that people ask us all the time here in the coaching world is, how much do I spend on gifts? What do I reinvest into my client database? And you have a whole theory around that, and I'd love for you to share it, because I think that's really important for our members to hear, and even our guests that are listening. What do you spend on gifting? What does that look like in a budget?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny, is most people's gifting budget is nothing. They may spend 20% of revenue on marketing to acquire a lead or to acquire people through Facebook ads or traditional sponsorships or whatever else, through country club memberships and ball game seats and all that kind of stuff. But most people's gifting budget is pathetic. It's like, hey, we got $2,000 left over. Let's go buy. What can that buy for our 200 people? And so they spend $10 or $2 or whatever it is on everybody, calendars and trinkets. And so our numbers based upon, you know, I want to put $1 in, and over the next 5 years, I want to get $10 back out. So I want an ATM machine. I want to put $1 in. And what's interesting is people, when we tell the people the equation, they freak out until I tell them that casinos, into their whales and their high rollers, reinvest 20% of revenue back into those people. Not net, 20% of revenue. Why? Because they put $1 in, they get 80 cents. They put 20 cents in, they get 80 cents back. That's a 4-to-1 ratio. They'll do that all day long. If a casino does it, it's because it prints money all day long. So in any sort of business, our rule of thumb is you should be reinvesting 5, upwards of, we do 15% of net. So if a client's worth 100 grand in profit to you, you should be reinvesting 5 grand to 15 grand back into them. And they can be in a multitude of ways, but I'll put in, you know, 5 grand all day long if I'm going to get $100,000 back. And that's, and people don't understand that. They're like, that's a lot of money. I'm like, it's a lot of money until that 100 grand goes away. And so the goal of gifting isn't warm fuzzies. It's not just to stay top of mind. It's to drive real revenues, to keep the client. It's to grow them and get all of their business. And the third is the secret sauce. People ask, John, how many sales reps do you have? I'm like, I have about 2,500. And they're like, how do you afford 2,500 sales reps? I'm like, well, the CEO of the Orlando Magic, they opened up the NBA for us. All of my clients, CEOs, VPs, everybody, I douse them in so much love. But guess what? Over time, without even asking, they reciprocate back to me. And they become my sales reps. That's the secret sauce. So the Indians are a client of ours. After gifting them for 6.5 years, in one day, they referred me to 38 other teams. And I'm not talking about a mass email. I'm talking a one-to-one email. They let me write the email. They sent it on my behalf to all of their top relationships. What's 38 referrals from the Cleveland Indians worth? It's worth a lot of freaking money. But most people never get to that level of taking and reinvesting their profit to keep clients, to grow them, and then to turn all of their clients into really their own personal sales force. That's, everybody thinks they have loyalty. They don't have loyalty. They have passive loyalists that sit on their hands and do nothing. A loyalist, the problem that we solve with Giftology is, if your clients and your employees aren't actively sending you referrals, then you have a loyalty problem. Anybody that's an active loyalist will go out of their way to advocate for you. And there's a big gap between a passive loyalist that does nothing and just sticks around until something better comes along, and somebody that's an active loyalist, that's a whole different ballgame. And most people, they're like, oh yeah, I did gifts once or twice over the last 10 years. And I'm like, how'd that work out for you? Like, that's not, you don't say please and thank you once or twice over 10 years. You do it all the time. And when you do that, you inspire people to go act on your behalf. And that's the big difference.
I love that. So I'm going to give you one last question, then I'm going to wrap up how Giftology actually works and give yourself a little plug here. But you end a big part of the book about people who are new in the business or don't have a budget yet, that sometimes, in most cases, a nice handwritten note on a nice cardstock will go a lot further than a $25 trinket that's going to end up in the trash. So I would love for you to give us maybe a pointer or two on what you think should be in that handwritten note, besides giving honor or praise or whatever. Do you have a little nugget for our listeners of what you would put in that handwritten note? Because we do coach everybody from the brand new LO, the brand new realtor, all the way up to, you know, the one percenters in the country that are crushing it. So I think that there is a good need for that handwritten nugget there as well.
Yeah, so the handwritten note, in fact, when people outsource all their gifting to us, for us to do gifting, I won't allow them to do it unless a handwritten note goes with all of the gifts. It's that important. If something just ships from Amazon or feels automated, guess what? It doesn't deepen the relationship. There's no emotional connection. The handwritten note is the linchpin. So if somebody doesn't have a budget to do gifting, I'm like, forget the $50 trinket and spend an hour writing the note. And it's so important to us that we have our business cards are metal. There's, you know, $3. They're a little piece of steel. Our letterhead that I send out, when I send out just a handwritten note, costs $9. It's a sheet of steel. I write on it with a Sharpie. And when somebody, you know, you get a $15 flashlight, it's in the trash and within 6 days, 6 months, you forget about it. Who cares? So I spend $9 on my letterhead, and when I handwrite a note, or my team handwrites a note, people show it around the office, they frame it. I've had people freak out. They're like, what is this? Is this artwork? Like, they don't know what to do with it. So what I would say is that put the time in and invest in the best letterhead that you can afford. You know, wax seal, the whole 9 yards. Because handwritten notes anymore with text messages, Facebook, all that kind of stuff. And what I'd say is that, don't make it about yourself. A handwritten note should be about them, honoring them, their legacy, who they are. It's not asking for referrals. It's not hinting at anything. It's can make a human connection. And if you want to take it a step further, there's been all kinds of studies around the idea that if you write a really thoughtful handwritten note and you go and take it and give it to them and read it to the person in person, your gratitude and happiness goes up, and so does theirs. There's all kinds of studies that have been done. The happiness advantage, all that kind of stuff. They've done studies. And you'll probably cry, they'll cry. They will never, ever forget that note. They will never do it. They will put it in a secret place. They'll put it away. And on a rainy day when they need a pick-me-up, I guarantee that note will be around. So it's not like people are like, oh, is it just about spending more money than the person? Like, you're not going to outspend some of your competitors, but you can invest your money differently in your time and your resources to build relationships. And really, that's what the Giftology system is all about. It's not about just blowing money just to say that you blew it. It's about really deepening it. And so the handwritten note to me is one of the most important things by far.
Awesome. So, gosh, I took a ton of stuff away today. I know our members will too. And wrapping this up, I want you to share with us. I know we've already found a referral for you. I did a talk in Maryland last week, and I was saying I was interviewing you, and the guy I was speaking for said, well, what is Giftology? And I'm like, oh, dude, it's this whole gifting program. And I'm going up. He goes, I need that person. So I know we already connected you this week, but I think a lot of our members out there work really hard to streamline, because in the core, we talk about 3 things. We prospect, we hire and train a team to cater to our clients, and then we've got to work on the money, right? We got to be profitable. So if there's a service out there that can help us streamline gifting, I know there's many people that would be like, yes, pick me, I'm in. So in wrapping this up, can you give us a quick lowdown on how to get involved in Giftology, exactly what that service looks like, and how we would reach you in the future to connect with you guys?
Yeah, so what I'd offer is, a giftologist has to offer a gift of some sort, right? That would be inappropriate for me to not offer something that we walk all of our clients, whether you're $1 million company or whether you're the Chicago Cubs, we walk everybody through what's called the 10 worst gifts to avoid giving. Even if you're going to do the gifting on your own and not outsource it to us, it's things like gift cards, it's things like consumables, it's things like alcohol. And we walk all of our clients through this white paper. If your tribe wants to download it for free, if they go to thegiversedge.com, they can download the white paper for free. They also get some of our tips and tricks and some of our best practices. You know, you don't have to go buy Amazon. You don't have to go buy the book on Amazon. You can start there. And then if you decide that you want to, as you know, the book is about a 60, 90-minute read. Our whole playbook's in there. There's not Giftology 2 coming out next year. Like everything that we have goes into the book. But for somebody that's a giver that I don't want people that want to use gifting as a manipulation. I want people that want to use gifting and are playing the long game. Like it's sexy to talk about it, but if somebody wants to reach out to me directly, I'm happy to connect them to our team of giftologists. And what I'll say is that somebody that wants to follow a recipe, if you think you're the best gift giver on the planet, then don't outsource it to us. But if you want to follow a process and you want to outsource things and know that it's going to be handled well and follow our recipe, people are like, oh, I don't like that gift. I'm like, well, the gift's not for you. The gift is for the other person. And you shop with your own eyes. And so if somebody's willing to follow the process and work with our team of giftologists, they can email me, John@Ruhlin Group. That's my own personal email, john@ruhlingroup.com, RUHLINGROUP. I'll connect you to the team of giftologists, and then we'll walk you through what's called a loyalty planning session. We'll walk you through what you should be budgeting, who the relationships are. Once somebody sends us a list of their top relationships, at that point, they don't touch anything. We help them handwrite the notes, we package it, we pick the gift, we personalize it, we wrap it, we do everything and drop ship it for them. So all they do is collect the thank yous and the referrals and the, oh my gosh, you're so thoughtful. How did you know to send me a gift on some random Tuesday in April? And so really the goal is 95% of my business is done for you services for somebody so they don't touch it.
That's fantastic. Well, I can't thank you enough. I love the book. If you guys, again, haven't gone and bought this book, he says you don't have to, but you should. It was really great. I've highlighted it. Somebody came and asked me if they could borrow it. I said, I've written all in it, all kinds of notes. But it was a great read, quick read. I got some great nuggets out of it. I can't thank you enough for your time today, John. And we'll put your website up there and your email address so we can get some business to you. And thanks again from the Core Nation. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Kendra, for having me.